Hey guys, it's Dasha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over some books that I think I'm going to end up rating 5 stars. I've never done one of these before. I think in the past I didn't really know my reading taste that well, or I just kind of never really wanted to hype myself up by giving books like a preemptive 5-star rating in my head and then be let down. So I've never done one of these, but I think as my reading tastes change and evolve, I think it'd be fun to kind of predict some books that I think will be 5 stars. And then later on, I'll come back to this video once I've read all of the books and see what I thought of them. So I don't think we need much more explanation than that. Let's get into it. So we're gonna start with fantasy, which is my favorite, and the first book I want to talk about is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I don't really know the kind of plot synopsis of this, but I know that it is inspired by ancient South American culture and mythology and folklore, and I know that it has something to do with gods and possibly like a human that is preparing themselves to ascend to the gods or become like a vessel for the gods, and that alone is so up my alley. You guys know I love anything to do with like gods in my fantasy. I think it's always just such an interesting topic to explore, and I also think that it would be really interesting given that I haven't read a lot of books inspired by South American mythology. So I think this would be a good place to start, because also this book has gotten like really good reviews across the board, and a lot of these reviews have come from people that I really trust. So I'm like hoping that this will be up my alley. I remember I got an ARC from NetGalley and I read like a chapter maybe, and I was into it, but obviously a chapter is not enough, but like it seemed like the writing style was just up my alley. The god thing was up my alley, so this sounds like it is perfect for me, and I'm really hoping that it will be a 5-star read. The next book on this list is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is a beloved book here on BookTube as of late. As far as I know, we follow Fitz, who is the bastard son of the current prince. He was taken away when he was really young, but then one day he is brought back to the palace, and in shame, the prince abdicates and runs away. So whoever takes over the throne decides to keep Fitz around because he's royal enough to be invited to royal events and like big meetings, but he's not quite royal enough to be like super important. So because of that, they make Fitz the royal assassin. Listen, this book has been getting so much love on BookTube lately. I know it's been a classic like in the fantasy genre for a long time, but it's been getting a lot of hype lately, and again from people that I really trust. Also, it's blurbed by George R. R. Martin, and I trust that man with my life, so I trust him on this. I also know it's the start to this like really big expansive fantasy like world and series, and this series has like magical ships and dragons and all of these fantastic things that I'm super hyped for. And I also heard that it's just like really character driven and very human and emotional. It just seems like a perfect mix of things I like, and I am really looking forward to it. It's on my list of books to read this year anyways, and I just have really high hopes. And then the last fantasy book on this list is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This one is also, funnily enough, blurbed by George R. R. Martin, so there's another check in the box for me. I don't know the plot synopsis of this like I did with Assassin's Apprentice, but I know that it's a grimdark fantasy. It's like the holy grail of grimdark. I also heard from Leanna over at Leanna's Library. This is her favorite series, and she always goes on about how like the characters are incredible and it's just such a compelling story, and I think that that's something I find I quite enjoy in my adult fantasy. And the fact that it's grimdark just makes it a bit more interesting to me, because I do have a love for things like horror, and I don't mind like really nasty shit in my books. I'm perfectly okay with it, so I feel like this will be a perfect marriage of like the character stuff that I quite enjoy from, for example, A Song of Ice and Fire, and then the more like grimdark, gritty, nasty elements from horror. I feel like this will like be that perfect middle ground for me. I just have really high hopes for this whole series. The next book I want to talk about is a sci-fi book. It is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. As far as I know, this is essentially like a slice of life on a spaceship. It's set in the far future where space exploration is super common and like nothing at all to the people that live in the universe, and you're following like a crew of a spaceship. They're super, diverse in terms of like alien races and like humans. And from what I heard, it is just because it is that kind of slice of life, it's not like hard sci-fi. It's a little bit more like emotional, it's a bit more relatable, even though it is set in like outer space. And I've just heard so many good things. And This is kind of weird because like most of these books I've heard really good things about, but a lot of the time when that happens, I get a bit more weary about approaching a book. For example, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is not on this list despite me having pre-ordered it, because once it did come out, everyone was giving it like these incredible ratings and just talking about it, and I was like, now I'm scared. But funnily enough, like The Long Way to Small Angry Planet has basically only good reviews across the board, and again, a lot of them from people I trust, but for some reason it hasn't scared me off. If anything, I'm like more excited to read it. It helps that it's a little bit of like a shorter sci-fi. It helps that it's part of like a series, but it's a standalone series, sort of like they're all companion novels, which kind of helps because you're not diving into this like massive series. And the other thing too is because it's more character driven, which is not always my thing, but I get like really confused with hard sci-fi. My pea brain gets really confused when it comes to like space battles and spaceships fighting and trying to keep track of who's where and what's what. So I feel like it'd be really fun to have that really cool sci-fi setting, but the story be more focused on characters. I feel like that might be something that's a bit more up my alley. So I'm really hyped for this one, and I'm really expecting it to be like so up my alley. I just hope it doesn't let me down. The next three are all nonfiction books. So the first one is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doty. She's a YouTuber, I believe, and she talks a lot about her experience as a mortician and just dealing with death all the time. And so this book is a sort of just memoir exploration of death, and I think her whole like goal with her channel and her books is to kind of demystify death and like make it easier to talk about in the common conversation, and that kind of appeals to me. Again, rave reviews across the board from like most people I know that have read it, and that's always a good sign. And from what I've seen of Caitlin's videos, she kind of presents things in a very humorous but like a morbidly humorous way, which is up my alley. So I'm hoping that it's gonna kind of make me view death and our conversations around it a little bit differently, but still be like lighthearted and interesting enough as just a regular piece of nonfiction, because I don't read memoirs. I don't really think I would enjoy them. There's no one that I like enough to really want to read their memoir for the most part. So I feel like this is going to be a really good cross between like memoir and just regular nonfiction, and it's just gonna, I feel like it's gonna be really successful for me. The next book I want to talk about is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson. So from what I know about this is the story of people who have been publicly shamed, mostly like on the internet or like big media outlets, and he talks to these people and just kind of tells their story and what we can learn from them. And I like that idea a lot. I love when people get a little bit meta about like social media and the current state of the internet and media in general. I find that's such a cool topic that we don't talk about that much. Like obviously between ourselves, especially if you're part of a community, we love to talk about certain things that we find within our community. For example, like we talk about consumption on BookTube and like that kind of stuff, right? But in terms of the general public and the general effect of social media and the internet, I think it's like always a really cool discussion in my opinion, and I feel like this book would just be a really good addition to my arsenal of like understanding how it's changed and how it has affected people's lives. And I've heard it's also like really funny, and overall I just have really good feelings. I like these kind of hyper specific nonfiction books that just focus on like a really weird niche topic, and I feel like this is going to be just so perfect for me. And then the final book I want to talk about is On Killing. This is by Dave Grossman, and this is basically, as the subtitle would suggest, the psychological cost of learning to kill in war and society. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like this is just going to be something that kind of like Kilo. If you don't know, Kilo is one of my favorite books of last year, probably my like top nonfiction of all time. It was an account of the Colombian drug cartels, but it was a very deep and very personal exploration of it, and it just completely changed how I view certain things. And I talk about that book a lot. I'll link some videos where I talk about it, but basically after having read that book, my perception of certain issues shifted completely, and that's kind of what I'm expecting from this book. I know that is like a really heavy weight to place on this book's shoulders, but that's just kind of the vibes I'm getting. I feel like this is going to be something that really influences me and forces me to look at things differently, and I know that this book has been through like multiple reprints. I know that this book has been on a lot of people's list of like best nonfiction if you're interested in things like military history or like psychology and that kind of stuff. Plus, this edition is actually updated. It says it encompasses suicide bombings, school shootings, 21st century military conflicts, recent trends in crime, and more. So I like that it's not just going to be focused on the military aspect, but it's also going to talk about the actual like society and how we view death again. Maybe I'm just a really morbid person. Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's calling to me, and like I have a feeling that it will be very influential in how I view things going forward, or at least I'm hoping. Maybe I'm putting too much pressure on this book. Who knows, but I am really excited for it, and I have a feeling that it will be as good as I think it is. And that's it. That's my short and sweet list. Once I read all of these, I will absolutely come back and make a video and let you know what I thought of all of them. So, you know, watch this space. If you have read any of these, let me know what you think. My social media is linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there. And other than that, I'll just see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.